Hello Dave, and possibly Dave's mate, if you forward this video on like I suggested you might. I'm going to go through the basics of sewing for you today with a particular focus on repairing. A lot of the techniques are also used in like making and things as well, like you thread a needle in the same way, but I'm going to be focusing on repair specifically because that's what you wanted. So I've set the camera up here, I'm not trying to be mysterious, I just thought it'd be easier if you could see my hands, and I'll do my best to hold things up and roll cigarettes. So materials wise, what I'm going to suggest based on the composition of your wardrobe and my own like sewing things is that you steal a little sewing kit out of a hotel room, such as this guy. What you're going to need is a sewing needle and some thread. You might have some threads in different colours. You're probably also going to want an extra thing of black thread because so much of your wardrobe is black. You're also going to need a pair of scissors. These are sewing scissors, but you can use any, if you've got a Stanley knife and you want to use that to cut it, just do so with your own safety in mind. You're a grown-up, I'm sure you'll work it out. Basically all you need is a needle and thread. You may additionally want some pins, and this is a needle threader, some people really like those. So to start, let's assume that you've got a spool of thread and you're going to cut some thread off there rather than just taking it off a card. So you're going to get your needle out. So that's ready there. We're going to start by threading the needle. Take your spool of thread, find the dangly end. Sometimes it's like put into a little notch around the top or the bottom. This one isn't. If you are buying thread, the cheapest thread is nylon thread. That's generally quite strong. It doesn't have any kind of tendency to rot or go bad. You can also get cotton and silk and whatever. Just get the nylon shit, it's fine. You're going to pull out a length of thread off the spool. The Victorian schoolmistress that I learnt it from suggests that you get a nose of thread, so you hold the spool at one end and you pull your arm straight, so you've got that as a length. Longer lengths mean that you have to tie it off less, so you don't have to go through the faff of sewing, cutting the thread, tying it off, and adding another bit, but it does also mean it's more prone to tangles. A nose is a perfectly acceptable amount to go, and if you do more, then you'll learn what works for you. You need to cut our thread with whatever scissors or blade we have, and then next we're going to thread our needle. So you want everything at the top to be like as blunt as possible. You don't want it to be all frayed out, because otherwise when you try and put it through the needle, if that's the eye of the needle, which is what the little hole at the end's called, when you try and put the thread through, if it's all splayed out, then it'll kind of go through like that and it won't properly go through and it'll shear, or it won't go all the way through anyway. So you want it to be all like nice and close together so it can go in, really penetrate easily. One of the ways that you can assist doing that is to give it a little lick, and that just kind of brings all the little fibres together within that. Needle has two ends, pointy end and an end with a hole in it. This is the pointy end, this is the end with a hole in it. If you take the pointy end and push it into your finger, you will push the needle into your finger. They are sharp. You can hurt yourself, but you've got to work at it. You can kind of poke the end and you'll generally be all right. Get the little bit of thread and put it through the little hole in the end, which, like I said, is called the eye. You can sort of see it glinting. I don't know how to make the focus work. Just like that. You see I'm doing on YouTube. I don't think it's changed the focus at all because it's a phone camera. Put the little thread through the end of the needle. Holding it quite close to the end like this means it kind of stays quite firm. You can see the bit of thread there. And you just push it through the little hole. It is fiddly, but you get there. And then that's through. Something that always comes in like the little sewing kits, or like quite often, is this thing, and this is called a needle threader, and this is designed to help you if you're stuck. So it's got this little wire diamond shape on it. If you can see that, it's a contrasted way against my sleeve there. So it's got this little diamond shape, and the idea is that this is a bit stiffer than a piece of like cotton thread. So you poke that through the little hole in the end of the needle and like squish it down like that. So it's like it's gone through there. And then you put the thread through the little loop, which is obviously much bigger. And then you pull that back through and that threads the needle for you. I never bother, but if threading the needle is something that's really annoying to you or really difficult, or you just really can't get the hang of it and it's becoming frustrating, use a needle threader. They're really easy to get hold of and you can buy them all online or whatever. Okay, so we've got our needle threaded and we've got 2 strands coming off because we've got the needle going through a bit in the middle. Does that make sense? So if I hold each end of the thread, the needle is threaded on it like a little bead. And very much like a tie, like a tie that you would wear, you want a long end and a short end. The short end is called the tail, and then the long end, I don't know if it has a name or not, the working thread, I suppose. So have one bit shorter than the other. It doesn't really matter which it is. And then on the long end, so that's the bit that's going to stay in the fabric, going to tie a little knot. So just wrap around your finger and tie a knot in it. And what you want to try and do is 2 knots on top of each other. Like that. And that makes a knot that's fat enough that then when you put the needle and thread through the fabric, it doesn't just come all the way through. So that secures it. Different people will do different things. This is just the way that I do it. If you find another way or another tutorial and that works better for you, do that. So the other important thing is to keep an eye on where your tail is for this guy. So you don't want to end up with just kind of both threads trapped, because otherwise you can't like tie it and knot it off. So as the working thread gets shorter, like the long main bit, the bit with the knot in it, you're going to need to keep like pulling it along and you'll pull the tail shorter. That may or may not make sense as we go. If I can demo it better, then I will. So the first, now we're ready to start actually sewing. So the first stitch I'm going to show you is called the over sew, and basically it's really good for a little hole. This is generally what I do for any kind of hole repair. You've got the hole and you just come in behind it if this is the fabric, and you go round and round and round, and that pulls the whole thing shut and creates like a little helix telephone cord sort of shape in the fabric. I found a pair of Mike's socks, which I can now sew up with a different colour, because it doesn't matter, because it's the bottom of a sock, he won't care. I care about my socks, he doesn't. So I found a sock with a hole in it, the kind of thing you might have. So you had your hole in your t-shirt, because things wear out when you wash them. So take your needle, and you want to put it so that the little knot goes in the back. It doesn't matter too much if it's the bottom of a sock, but you don't want to have anything too badly visually. So you can see that that's the little bit with the knot in it. That's now gone onto the inside. You can see it's pulling a little bit of tension there. And then you're going to go around and around. So in that bit, underneath the little hole, and poke it out the other side. And then just pull it all the way through. And just keep going round and round. Do have your hand or something inside, or you can do it on your foot if you're feeling flexible, because otherwise there is the danger that you sew the front and the back of the sock together. Not that I've ever done anything like that. I definitely have. And in not very much time at all, the little hole is sewn up. So this does leave a little bit of a scar on the fabric, but generally it's, quite small, not so noticeable, and it's not as bad as having a big hole in the fabric that you had before. And that's all nice and tidy. Now we're going to do knotting it off. So I'm going to put the needle into the sock, I'm going to turn it inside out because we're going to knot it off on the back. And I tie mine off using what's called a French knot. If you see someone else doing something different, that's also fine. So it's pulled all the way through to the back. I just kind of had it half through while I was turning it inside out. And then you basically take a little bit of the fabric. This will be visible from the outside, so you can do it over the mend as well. And you want it to just kind of go in and out like an eyebrow piercing or something, so it goes in and out, but it's like just going curved through the same spot. You know, take the thread that you've got attached to the fabric, wrap it round the pointy end of the needle like 3 times, and pull that down so it's tight. So you've got these little wraps on the needle at the top end, and they're pulled down. And then I'm holding the tension with my thumb on this as well. Pull it all the way up, and what that does is it ties a little knot in the thread. So that's now secure, and it's not going to come back out. I then tend to do a single additional stitch just to make sure the knot stays nice and flat against the fabric, because otherwise it's sort of sticking up. That is an entire extra thing that you don't need to worry about. And then you just trim it short. So I've got a little like half an eyelash sort of thing left over. And that is a basic little hole repair. I thought I'd show you a couple of other little things I thought you'd find helpful. But honestly, I taught that one to my friend, and she went from, I think I picked up a needle once in primary school, to having fixed all of the leggings that she had within about an hour. She had sort of 6 or 7 garments. You just watch me do that in real time, and the time counter says about 10 minutes, so... And that includes quite a lot of chat time, so yeah. The other thing that you might encounter while you're doing repairs are popped seams. So I've got this lovely garment which I created, where the seams like to pop all over the place. So like if you've sat down and your jeans have cracked, that's something that can happen. So I'm going to be working on this piece. This has got a few little seams in it that have come apart. So you can see that has split, and my machine stitching has broken. So I'm going to just use a little bit of hand sewing to fix that. We're going to do the same trick. You can see that my things have got to kind of the same length. Maybe visible, yeah. So I'm going to pull one so that's a little bit more length, so we don't get all knotted up in ourselves. I'm going to tie the little 2 knots in the end. And then there's 2 kind of stitches that you can do. One of them's called running stitch, and that's when you just go in and out, and then you put your knot in the end, you go kind of in and out, just basic, and then you just tie a knot in the other end, and that just makes a flat seam. It works okay if you need something to be held in place temporarily, like if you're cuffing your trousers and you just want to do it, see how it looks, try them on, walk around a little bit and not worry about pins falling out or anything. But generally it's not strong enough to hold anything, so it's not wonderfully helpful. You can Google running stitch if you need to later. So this is my popped seam, and I'm going to do what's called a back stitch. So I want to do this part here. So I'm going to put my needle in on the back, just slightly away from where I want this. The smaller and tighter the stitches you do, the stronger they'll be, but it'll also take you longer. And then, because I'm going to be sewing along here, this is my like direction of travel, all of my stitches are going to go backwards. Hopefully it'll kind of make sense. So I'm going to push it back in there, so I'm travelling kind of backwards, and I'm going to make it come up here, which is again my stitch length away. And what this does is it pulls the tension in each direction, and that makes it really strong and kind of locked off a bit. So if you pull lightly against it, the stitches are slightly less likely to break. So it goes in, kind of backwards and then out forwards. So again, it's doing a lot of the stuff is going kind of round and round anyway. Like you're in a rat song. Love will find a way, just give it time. Round and round, goes around, comes around. Okay, so hopefully you can kind of see what I'm doing. I'm sort of trying to do it enough that I can see it, but also so it's visible on the camera. I've never been very good at these kinds of instructions. I tried to teach someone how to do some origami on a webcam once, and it did not go wonderfully well. Got about halfway and then they got stuck. Something which is kind of worth noting with backstitch is that one end comes out looking quite pretty and the other end comes out looking a bit atrocious. So I'll flip it over and show you the other side in a bit. So the top side, kind of the front, comes out with kind of a nice little neat thing of stitches, and the better the sewer you are, the more even you can keep your stitches. You want to keep like a nice even tension, so all of your stitches come out the same length and none of them are pulled too tight or anything like that. Also, it depends on like what you're doing, so this isn't going to be visible. I feel very confident in my ability to remend it. It doesn't matter so much. Okay. So I've gone a little further as well, just in the hopes that it doesn't do too much, that it doesn't come apart again. And then that's what the back looks like. This is an extra bit of machine thread. So it doesn't look like the worst, but it doesn't look wonderfully neat compared to this side. So like generally you want to make sure that the front, you're thinking about which side is the front and the back. Not so much for a split inside of your trousers seam than anything else. But if you've got kind of one side's going to be visible and one side isn't, make sure the pretty side's the side that's visible. I've come to the end, so I'm going to do the same French knot to tie it off at the end. So just going through like our eyebrow piercing, wrapping it a few times, pushing it up, and then I'm doing my little extra stitch to help the knot lay a bit flatter. Trim. And that's that. So that's a good like popped seam in trousers thing. Something else which might be kind of helpful, I'm not really sure of when, but if you've got like two raw edges like this and you just want to hold kind of the very edge of it together, then you can use the same over sewing as we did before. I'm not going to tie a knot in this because I'm just going to pull it out immediately after. But you can do the same sort of edge binding. So just that like helix like we were going around when we sewed up the little hole. So you just sort of go, you go in the same side every time. So here I'm going in like the underside every time. And you can use that just to hold this bit kind of very together. If you find that that's something that's come apart and you want to put it back together like that, like maybe you haven't got a lot of inside fabric. It's not the strongest, but it does work for picking things up. I guess like the very bottom of a hem might be a good place for that. Like if it's sort of just coming apart and it's not going to be under any tension or anything. But you've kind of got a bit of trouser leg that's done that. That's just kind of something extra. I'm just going to pull this out because it doesn't need this bit of fabric and it might make it do weird things. So that's that. So that's your inside of seams. Something else which might be helpful, how to do buttons. Again, this is one of those dead simple when you know hows, and a lot of the same stuff about like threading a needle and tying knots in the end and tying it off, it's all the same. So once you've got an idea of those basics, then you're going to be well alright. So I've tied my two knots in. I've got my scrap of yellow fabric which needs a button. It was easy to demo. I've got one with 4 holes, but it's not a particularly different method for the 2 holes. I'll kind of talk you through, or a shank in fact. So got a knot tied in the end, starting on the back of the fabric and then coming up. Whoop, I pulled through too hard. You probably heard the little knot coming through the fabric. So don't pull too hard, otherwise the knot might come through the fabric. And then what you're going to do with your button is you're going to put the needle through the little hole from the back to the front, and that begins the attaching process. You can then choose which kind of pattern you want to do. I feel like it's probably purely aesthetic. Push it through the other little hole and the back of the fabric, and then continue to do that over and over until you have enough thread that it looks like it's going to be nice and secure. If you're not quite sure how much thread you want to do, have a look at the other buttons on the garment. I'm imagining that you're going to be putting a button back on a shirt, so just make it look like the other buttons on the shirt. And keep going. Or you might be doing this with trousers. Done a button back on some jeans when they popped out. Also managed to replace one of those, like, you know, like the Levi buttons that you get on jeans, where it's like put on with sort of rivets and stuff, and I had one of those pop through, and I replaced it with a regular button that just fit in the buttonhole, and that worked really well. So I got a little bit more out of that pair of jeans than I might have otherwise. So you've got the option of 2 different kinds of shape. You can hopefully see what I've just been doing. Out through a little hole, and then down through that hole, through one of the other little holes, and also with the fabric behind it. And you do that enough times, it'll be nice and secure. I've done 2 little lines. If you only have 2 buttons, then just round and round. It's the same sort of round and round helical start. That looks suggestive. Well, I hope your mate's a pervert as well. Just like the rest of us. It's the same round and round motion with all sewing, basically. It's just whether you round and round like that, or round and round like that, or round and round through the little buttonholes. I've done 2 lines. You can do a little X shape. If you've got a button with, it's called a shank, like when you've got a flat top and then it's got the little hole underneath, same thing, round and round, just go through the little hole in the back of the button. When you've got a flat button like this, push through the back of the fabric, and then like between the fabric and the button. So you want it to come out, but you don't want it to go through one of the little buttonholes. I've got this secure enough. And then what you do is you wind the thread, like just when you're finishing, wind the thread around the back of the button a few times and pull it nice and tight. And what that does is it lifts the button away from the fabric, so that then when you put the buttonhole piece over it, it's got space for somewhere to go. And then just push the needle back through to the back of the fabric. Beep. It was not visible. I thought that would be a cool shot, and then it wasn't. And then you tie it off in exactly the same way as you did before, going through with our little eyebrow piercing bit, wrap it through a few times, creating our French knot, and then pull, nice and tight and secure. And I do my 1 little extra stitch just to help the knot lie a bit flat. That is, again, optional. Booyah. Give it a little trim, and now you have a nice secure button on your shirt, trousers, or piece of yellow fabric. Definitely needed a button sewn on it. I'm going to go through just a couple of little like bonus features, just a little bit of extra stuff. I think honestly the oversew and the backstitch and the button, you will be able to repair 99% of your stuff. But I just thought I'd go through patching and darning. That's just something that I like to do a little extra. Ooh, I'm going to see if I can get a pair of socks that I've darned heavily so you can see what it looks like. Okay, found some. So darning is basically the process where you take an individual piece of thread on your needle, as you would for your sewing, and then you weave it, basically. You create a little woven patch. And what that does is if you've got a patch that's a little bit weak, or it's on an area that's quite hard wearing, like the heels of your socks that are going to then be rubbing up against your shoes, it just makes it a little bit stronger. And if you've got, you know, where it's kind of worn out, but it's not yet a hole, see if I can find a bit on these socks. Yeah, so there's holes in both of the toes of these, although we've sewn one up now. But you get that like worn out threadiness, where it's kind of just sort of gone bald. I like this little bit here, and it does that before it makes a hole. If you darn that, you can make it stop becoming a hole. And it's also something that I usually like to do if I've sewn something in a really high wearing area, like it's a sock, or if it's like this crotch bit of your jeans, then I like to give it a little extra, because otherwise it's just going to keep rubbing and we're just gonna pop out again. So you do that in a lot of the same way. This is a little bit more Anaraki and nerdy. If you really want to just up your repair game, this is going to help you out a lot. If you've got a pair of like wool socks, like someone's knitted them for you, then you generally want to use a bit of wool. But if you've just got some socks like this or some regular fabric, then you probably want to use just regular thread. Sorry, I'm talking too much. So when I've sewn up a hole in socks, I go over it with a little bit of darning. So again, we've got our hand in there. You can get a darning mushroom if you feel the need. And then we put the needle on the inside. So these socks are really tight, so I'm struggling to get my hand in with the needle. Because you want it to start on the inside. If you don't care, you can have it start on the outside. That probably would have been easier. Okay, I want my right hand for sewing. Oh, I've got to rethread my needle. My gosh. Apparently we've reached the limit of my sewing teaching. Okay, we've rethreaded our needle. Just goes to show the experts make mistakes. Okay, so we've got the hole that we sewed up before. And then what I'm going to do is basically just weave, and this is what a running stitch looks like, in and out, just to make a little in and out bit. And then next to it, I'm just going to do another little bit of in and out. I had my hand so carefully positioned, but completely out of the view of the camera. In and out, just like that. I don't know how the YouTubers all make it look so easy. And this is just, like I said, to reinforce that join and to reinforce the area. And I'll hold it a little bit closer to the camera when I've done a little bit. I'm just going to try and do a little bit more quickly. If you're being a proper like Victorian woman, so like Kathy Hayes got a YouTube video about darning, if you're interested, if I've whet your appetite, then you have like proper things where you can like count the threads and you make sure they're all really even. I just do it roughly. Rethreading the needle. Okay, I'm gonna pause the video, do the rest kind of along this way. You can kind of see there that there's some like vertical stitching that's sort of just coming in and out. I'm going to rethread it, I'm going to do the rest vertically, and then I'm going to unpause the video again because I think it'd be a bit boring to watch this fully in real time. Okay, I've mostly finished that, but I thought it was probably worth mentioning what you do when you run out of thread while you're sewing, but before you've finished your sewing project. Really simple. You want to make sure that you've got a little bit of thread left to knot it, otherwise it's going to be really faffy to try and like get the knot in it. But you do exactly the same knotting off as you did before. Trying not to like unthread the needle in the process. You wrap it. You probably want to leave a bit more thread than this. I'm always a little like over thrifty, and then it makes it hard to wrap it. Make sure it's still through the teeniest little half eyelash bit. Leave yourself more thread than this, don't be like me. And then pull it through so it knots it off exactly the same way as before. I'm going to do my little extra stitch, and that's unthreaded the needle anyway. Unthread the needle if it's not unthreaded itself. So you've got whatever little dangly amount that's left. And give that a little trim. Usually you do this on the inside, but you saw how much faff I had trying to get inside the sock before, so I've just done it on the outside because no one cares, it's a sock. And it's Mike and he won't care. Do it on the inside if you're being neat. Do yourself another length of cotton and trim. I'm saying cotton because generically this is sewing cotton. I think the thread is actually nylon. But I don't know. It's an unlabelled spool I just found in a box at home. Rethread the needle exactly like you did before. Tie the knot in the end. One knot. Two knot. And then again, going onto the inside if you're being good. If you're being horribly naughty like I am, we're just doing it on the outside because no one cares. And then just, this is where I like knot it off. So you can see that little dangly guy, or you can't, I don't know. So just come in again next to where I've knotted it off and just resume my sewing, starting a new little bit of thread. Okay, I'm going to get this the rest of the way across. Okay, so that's done all the way across, and you might be able to see that it's not really showing up wonderfully well, that we've got all of these verticals. When we've done the vertical, the next thing to do is the horizontal. So it's the same thing of that, just in and out of the fabric. I'll do it across so it's visible on the needle. And sometimes you can do it all with just like the one thingy. You can see it's gone in and out, hopefully. And then if we give it a little pull on this end, all the thread goes through like magic. Okay, it's not like magic, but that did look very cool as a visual. That was a good angle. And then the same thing. So you kind of, again, like, if you think about woven fabric, you kind of want it to go in and out at different points. So just make sure that the stitches don't line up super well. Otherwise you can accidentally end up with like a gather, like a pleat, which is great if you're trying to make a gathered skirt, not so great if you're trying to darn your sock. Something else to consider with darning is like the tension, especially if you're on a stretchy fabric like a sock is. So you want to be kind of holding the shape underneath. You can get something called a darning mushroom, which will do this for you. And that's basically just the little wooden domed thing that you can put inside. I always just hold my hand out. So this, I've done the thing that I said not to do. So I've got, it might not be easy to see, but there's two threads coming here. I've got my tail cut up. So I'm just going to like gently pull along the thread until the tail comes out. And then I'm just going to pull the other end until that like all flattens. So I've got like one end, basically we're making one end shorter than the other. So you can see that second end kind of at the bottom of my hoodie string. So that's what you do if you get like, if you see that you've got both threads coming out of the fabric at the same time, you've got your tail all caught up. It's not the worst, it just means that you'll be sewing double. Which is another thing I was going to mention. If you've got something that's a particularly high wearing area or something that you're really worried about, so if you've got like cargo trousers and you're putting a pocket back on or something, then what you might want to do is get some thicker thread. It's sometimes known